Can we stop this?
And she's a slut.
Then she loses it. So being called a slut is the worst thing you can say to Jennifer Walters. Let's unpack that. I'm Captain Kirk! Jen finally met a man who liked her for her, Daredevil. Sure, why not? They're both lawyers. It only seemed logical that they'd run into each other. And if they didn't, it would be a real waste of crossover potential. The chemistry between the actors was pretty good, with some decent banter, push and pull, so thumbs up there. But has romance really been the main story arc of the first season, with Jen wanting to find someone who appreciates the real her and then has sex with that person? I haven't seen every episode, but in the ones I have seen, she's lamenting about her love life, or lack thereof. Wouldn't it be better to relegate that to a subplot, guys, not the main plot? Well, if I was making this show, that's what I'd do. But anyway, Jen's happiness over this brief and tawdry hookup is short-lived when, at the end of the episode, all her dirty little secrets and a sex tape are shown to a live audience, just as she was about to receive the equivalent of a participation award. This moment of being exposed is the kind of thing I would expect to happen at the end of a teen rom-com like She's All That or 10 Things I Hate About You. I'm guessing the show's developer, Jessica Gao, probably watched those movies a lot when she was a teenager. If not those two, then movies like that, because she's clearly been influenced by them. That's not a bad thing, but I'm mentioning it because this is the kind of fear that only a teenage girl would have and consider cataclysmic. If this happened to a guy, he might be embarrassed, but instead of losing his shit, he'd probably just be like, "Can I get a copy of the tape?" There's been a lot of talk about this show being woke garbage or feminist trash. I'd agree that there are elements of both of these things in the show, but overall, She-Hulk is much too silly and doesn't take itself seriously enough to be a serious contender for either label. You know, with its tongue-in-cheek humor and breaking of the fourth wall and whatnot. I appreciate its irreverent style and satire, but somewhere along the way, I think the show has unintentionally become something else, something beyond an Ally McBeal knockoff. It's become sort of a proxy for the struggles of modern women, when the original She-Hulk from the comic was anything but that. I mean, let's be real here, it was TNA for young men. And this begs the question, who is this show for? I know that question has been asked, but I haven't heard an answer. So I came up with an answer that feels right from me. She-Hulk was developed and curated to appeal to female, non-Marvel fans between the ages of 12 and 25. When I think about it, it makes perfect sense. Jen has all the worries and concerns of a late teens, early 20-something young woman. Boys, dating, fashion, and herself. And that's pretty much it. These are things a young woman would think about a lot and would find interesting to watch and relate to. It's also a young woman that would think being called out as a slut is like the end of the world. Okay, that's fine, but I don't think Disney wants to admit that. They don't want to take the risk of alienating potential male viewers, even though they knew ahead of time that this show would draw criticism from them. It's like they say, there's no such thing as bad press. And really, it's more like free press. Even guys like me know about this show because of all the chatter online. And I don't give a shit about Marvel. I think Disney just really wanted to expand their reach and pull in a demographic that has typically not wanted to sample their content. Okay. So it's just not a show directed towards men. Fine, it's their property to do with as they please. But I think they made a huge mistake turning She-Hulk, a character made for men to look at, into a workplace rom-com. I really like the idea of a superhero satire, but when I first heard that title, I thought it was going to be something along the lines of Harvey Birdman. I mean, they have the same subtitle after all, so I don't think that conclusion is too much of a stretch. But that's not what we got. We got She's All That crossed with Working Girl. And we got something else too, a look into the mind of women and of the show's creator, Jessica Gao. When I watched the most recent episode with Daredevil, I couldn't help but imagine Jessica Gao in the place of Jen Walters, with her very juvenile fears literally put on display for all the characters and for us to see. Jessica hasn't penned every episode or even directed any of them, but it's become supposed by many people now that Jen Walters is Jessica Gao's self-insert. And when you watch and listen to Jessica Gao in interviews, it all becomes so plainly clear. Jen is Jessica. And you know what else? It's kind of sad. In what is supposed to be a light and subverting take on the very tired superhero genre, has inadvertently become pseudo-commentary on the plight of deeply insecure, middle-aged women. Of course, this particular insecure woman has managed to turn that insecurity into a Hollywood career, no doubt one of the most difficult places to find success, so my hat is off to her on that. But I really hope I'm wrong about this, and Jessica Gao is not this insecure and miserable. But I just have a funny feeling that I'm right. Taking cues from Jen's words and behavior in the show, I'm willing to bet that Jessica probably struggled a lot in love too, and also has some very deep-seated issues over her appearance. These kinds of issues, though, are kind of understandable. You know, considering how shallow and vain the world has become with appearance-driven things like Instagram and TikTok having gained such social currency. But there's something else in the show, something between the lines, in a sort of shallower pool of subtext. Bitterness. And it's a sentiment directed solely towards men. This show just really has a problem with men, but it also wants to be loved by them at the same time. It's a very telling contradiction, but it does explain why being called a slut is such a travesty. Jen wants to have her cake and eat it too. She wants to have all the carefree sex she can, but doesn't want to be seen as promiscuous. It's a double-edged sword. Like Allison said in The Breakfast Club, it's a trap. And isn't that fear a rather conservative fear? With progressive attitudes being as they are right now, shouldn't Jen be able to have however much sex she wants without feeling any shame? Maybe this show isn't as progressive as people are saying. Actually, for women, I think it's rather regressive. Plus, it's completely hypocritical of itself. The women in the show talk of owning who you are, something Jen claims to do, but never actually does. Anyway, when Jessica Gao was creating the show, she transposed herself into the place of Jen, giving her all the fears, woes, and insecurities she's had herself. She feels unattractive and underappreciated, suppressed by men, and after a life of rejection from them, has become embittered over them. Now, in her adult life, she has convinced herself that it's not her fault for men not liking her. It's their fault because they just don't see how good she is. So if in the show, Jen would focus her frustration on improving herself to maybe increase her desirability, then maybe she'd find some happiness. Instead of, just trying to delude herself that she's fine the way she is. I'm not the crazy one, it's just that everyone else has lost their minds. Now, that's just a theory, mind you, so take it with a grain of salt. I could be completely wrong, and this Jessica Gao could be a lovely person, a true diamond in the rough. Yeah, but I think I'm right.